have scale of robotaxi and autonomous vehicles on the road, 5 or 10 years from now, how does one differentiate an autonomous vehicle from a mobile phone, for example?
I think we see safety change where mobile and PNT, position, navigation and timing, can play a much bigger role today, even before we get to the world of autonomy and level 2. So the evolution of position, navigation and timing, and some of that capability has changed a lot in the last 30 years. That starts to help the telematics story, whether it's in a lorry.
But then also what happens if that fault can carry over to, let's say, emergency braking. So they go through rigorous testing, I think, in the automotive industry.
In Japan. So I think what they're doing is they're just trying to make sure that NVIDIA's investment gets those GPUs in those networks.
So hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Tech Tuesdays UK. I'm Subhash Ghosh, the founder of Tech Tuesdays UK, and it is truly fantastic to have you all here this evening. Today is a bit of special milestone for the simple reason we are completing the 40th episode of Tech Tuesdays today. So that's a good one. Thank you. Before I start, some essential notes on housekeeping. The washrooms are right outside. In case of emergency, of course, God forbid, please walk out of the door. Don't wait to upload your Insta and Twitter photograph, just in case. And mobile phones, of course, at all times during the session should be kept on silent mode. Once again, a warm welcome to everyone joining Tech Tuesdays this evening. You are obviously part of a vibrant and growing community where ideas flow freely and innovation is sparked through open and honest dialogue. For those attending Tech Tuesdays UK for the first time today, this platform was created about 2.5 years back, to be precise, to build a community that ideates, nurtures, and enables free-flowing discussions around disruptive technologies with the potential to impact 1 billion lives. As a young and growing initiative, we truly rely on your support. If today's session resonates with you, please help us amplify our message across all our social channels. Talk about us, share your learnings, and of course repost our content on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. You can find us across all platforms using the same handle, which is #TechTuesdaysUK. As a tradition, our wonderful volunteers will connect with some of you after the session to capture your thoughts on camera, and the reflections may appear on all our digital platforms. So don't hesitate, please be as candid as possible. So with regards to today's topic, which is on artificial superintelligence, we have an esteemed panel with us. We have Jamie Trin from GSMA. Jamie, please come and take a seat. We have Sukhjit Bandiro from Jaguar Land Rover. Okay. And joining us remotely, we have all the way from Milan, we have Dr. Siddharth Kastigir, WMG, University of Warwick. Siddharth, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Wonderful. And we also have Jonathan Smith joining from JLR. Jonathan, are you audible? Can you see us?
Yes, I'm from WMG as well with Siddharth.
WMG as well.
Thank you for inviting me. Looking forward to it.
Wonderful, great. So thank you once again, and let's get started. Before we leave the floor open, a quick small request. Every time you speak, share something, also share your organization and your name. It just helps us to know you better. Thank you. Floor all yours.
I guess I'll start. So good evening, everyone. It's good to see everyone here. My name's Jamie Trin. So I lead market development within the GSMA for automotive within GSMA Fusion. So my role within the GSMA, our team started about 18 months ago. We are part of the Open Gateway Initiative, which is looking at exposing network functionality through APIs. And it's predominantly based around getting the functionality and maximizing the functionality of 5G and bringing that to enterprises and consumers. So over the last sort of 3 years, Open Gateway has been focused on the supply side and getting the operators to bring the actual supply of APIs available and make it all, and there's that sort of functionality available to enterprises and consumers. Whereas my role within GSMA Fusion is about the demand side. So actually speaking to the automotive industry and in my role also media entertainment industry as well. But the focus within the last sort of 18 months has been within automotive. So speaking with OEMs, tier ones around what they actually need from the mobile network. So yeah, that's been my role for the last 18 months. Prior to that, I was at BT for 2 years within Division X. So we looked at private networks, IoT, all the sort of AI-driven innovations that sort of, outside the traditional telco tech stack that BT looked at. So I did that for 2 years. Before that, I was at Xxtra for 10 years. So predominantly my background has been in telecoms, predominantly in mobile telecoms, within sort of the biz development world. So yeah, that's my story.
Hi everyone, I'm Xxtra. I'm from Jaguar Land Rover. Primarily my role is an ADAS hardware engineer. So I joined late 2022, and primarily over my time there, I've been working on system integration for level 2+ driving. So when we talk about connected vehicles and automated driving, there's 6 levels of autonomy. So JLR being a luxury brand right now, we're focused on level 2+ autonomy. So we want to bring those rich advanced driver assistance systems to our customers to really enhance that experience. So my role was over system integration, mainly EMC testing. So if any of you are familiar with that, it's in case our ECUs in the car interfere with each other, that can cause really big safety issues. And with it being Road Safety Awareness Week, I think Siddhartha will talk more about that as well. I think it's really important. Now, these days, I've transitioned more to plant operations and our build management to see how we get our prototype cars off the line, and then hopefully we launch some cars soon. Thank you. So I'll pass over to Siddhartha.
Everything to do with driverless cars, drones, autonomous shipping. I've been in this autonomy space for a little over a decade now, and prior to that, have been in the automotive space for just over 15 years. One of the things that we wanted to bring for this content, firstly, really sorry I'm not there in person. This is my third Tech Tuesday, but my first one doing virtual. So sorry for this. But one of the things that I wanted to bring in this conversation was the whole concept of connectivity in the space of in automotive, and especially in the space of connected autonomous vehicles. The concept of connectivity is the most under-talked and less talked about aspect. While we do believe that connectivity has a big role to play, not only from a road safety perspective, but also from an efficiency and convenience perspective. Most of the automotive manufacturers that we've spoken to are of the opinion that connectivity is something that they would use. And I see Dr. Mike Short in the room, and we've had a conversation on this topic fairly recently, I would say. And one of the challenges that we've seen is to get the auto manufacturers to actually trust the information that they receive from third-party sources through a connected service. And I think that has been the biggest challenge that we've seen in this space. How do we get manufacturers to trust? Because once we get over that barrier of trust, and I'm looking at Jamie, who would also fill us in on this, and even from an OEM perspective, the information is out there. So there are connected services that are available. So you can look at it from an infrastructure perspective, from roadside information. You could look at it from a traffic light information perspective. You could look at it from a weather information perspective. But most of the times, these are being used as an add-on piece of information, not as something that OEMs are willing to rely on to make concrete decisions to provide from a safety perspective. So I think the big issue that we need to overcome as an ecosystem to actually reap the true benefits of connected services is how can we actually have this handshake of trust between the connected service provider and the connected service user, especially in an OEM side of things. I'll pause there before we delve into this a bit more deeper. So maybe one of the things I might actually maybe not challenge, but maybe starting off with Jamie, is when from a GSMA perspective, and you have been, Jamie, you mentioned quite a bit in this space that you've been in the mobile space for some time now. Have you had in your conversations, have you experienced where your stakeholders are maybe challenging you for the quality of service or more so, I think, reliability. I think less so on quality, but more so on the reliability of this service, so that they can actually make decisions on the information you're providing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not really the traditional OEMs have been not really talking about the quality of service, as you mentioned there, but more the reliability and predictability of service. Particularly like in Europe as well, when you think about roaming. And so, if one drives to Germany, from Berlin to Paris, for example, they want the actual, the guarantee or, that sort of reliability that it will work on whatever network, that the actual services actually can be reliable in that regard. So that's what the traditional OEMs are sort of talking about. But when you're talking about the future sort of connected vehicle, the software-defined vehicle, and you get to sort of autonomous and robo-taxis as well, they're talking about actual quality of service and actual prioritization of the network. So once you have scale of robo-taxi and autonomous vehicles on the road, 5 or 10 years from now, how does one differentiate an autonomous vehicle from a mobile phone, for example? Because these devices, these modules are all going to share the same network, and so that's when you talk about quality of demand and quality of service is how can you actually guarantee critical services within a vehicle, because once you get to a stage where you need an incident where you need to intervene within an autonomous vehicle, whether that's from a teleoperator, from a remote for a remote driver who's miles away or hundreds of miles away, you're going to need that guaranteed connectivity to be able to have that reliable service, to be able to teleoperate that vehicle in an emergency situation. So there's different aspects to quality of service and quality of demand within the automotive space, and it just really depends on who you speak to. At least that's the sort of conversations that I've had within the sort of last 18 months, and the sort of differences between your traditional OEMs and the sort of autonomous vehicle players who are coming to the fore.
Okay, just wanted to take that thought and maybe bring Jonathan in also. Jonathan, maybe if you could also introduce yourself, but also talk a bit from the UK site perspective. I think you've been quite foundational in the whole UK site project. Maybe if you could introduce that also as part of introducing yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Siddhartha. Thanks. So I work with Siddhartha at WMG on safe autonomy. One area that I've been looking at recently is around the software-defined vehicle ecosystem and all of the capabilities and cultural changes that are going to be required to sort of build that capability in the UK and more broadly. And I think the software-defined vehicle ecosystem is often very underestimated, in the sense that a lot of the commercial opportunities I would describe as being the top of the iceberg that's above the water, which relates to a lot of commercial services that we see being run through mobile phones at the moment and being seen as an opportunity within the automotive space. But there's a huge amount of the iceberg that sits under the water with regards to the operating systems that bring all of the components together, the safety critical integration that's required, the segmentation of bandwidth that's been talked about, and building an ecosystem both in terms of capability that can capitalize on an open operating system, but also a cultural change, particularly within the automotive industry, of being software first in the way that the vehicle is engineered from start to finish is going to be a huge challenge to ensure that these commercial opportunities at the top of the iceberg can be built upon. And as Siddhartha mentioned, was involved in the UK site project, was one of the very early projects in the UK to look at creating a real-world connected corridor in the Midlands, and looking at bringing together partners like Vodafone, JLR, some of the infotainment developers. And I think it was clear really from those early projects, which were sort of around 2018 to 2020 time, that the road to commercializing these kinds of services is going to be a long and difficult one, especially when there are huge infrastructure investments required before any of the business models can be mobilized. So I guess one of my questions is really where people in the room see early commercial opportunities, the kind of revenue streams that are going to set the platform to then be able to build as we move towards higher and higher levels of autonomy and exploiting some of the more novel and more ambitious business models.
So just on that, I think one of the big thing that we've realized, actually, I think Jonathan highlighted this a bit, is we've gone through this hype circle of connectivity and autonomy over the last decade, and we finally the rubber is hitting the road from a commercialization perspective. And I personally wasn't aware that Sukhjeevan has had a pivot in his workspace, and I'm very intrigued by the whole focus from a manufacturing perspective, because that's where we are seeing in my conversations with the Far East, especially the South Koreans and the Japanese, a lot of the connectivity and autonomy is actually going into the manufacturing plant space. And I wondered, Sukhjeevan, if you could talk a bit around where the manufacturing automation you see is evolving, and the role of connectivity and autonomy in that space. Are we very keen to understand where that is heading?
Yeah, I think I've been on the job for a week, so it's a new role. But generally, what I've heard is robotics is AI manifested, and so we'll probably see a shift to more robotics coming into the plant. And then in terms of manufacturing, I think that's really important, because delving into that world, they haven't picked up as much AI, digital transformation as one may think. So the use of AI information, that can really actually speed up that process, finding defects, knowing who the correct people are involved, parts, and it's a lot of, and you spoke earlier about these new relationships. It could be, let's say, the customer-facing relationship. What happens in the warranty process if your car breaks down? Getting information on that part and then fixing it. All these new relationships, I think as we move forward, there's these new gaps to explore, and where those lines intersect.
I think the relationship point's a very interesting one. One quote around the software-defined vehicle that I had from someone who was established in the automotive industry is, we don't understand how software sits in with our traditional bill of materials. And I think it really illustrates that there's a mindset of how relationships within the supply chain currently exist, and changing the way in which those relationships exist, and particularly having them exist beyond the manufacture of the vehicle and right the way through the service of the vehicle, I think is a huge mindset change in the way that commercial relationships are established.
And maybe I would be very keen to understand, Jamie, have you seen an evolving landscape where the relationships have changed over the last decade or so? Because in my conversation, especially with the OEMs, the traditional OEMs, if I may say so, the type of conversations have evolved drastically from being give us everything to just tell us what you can give us reliably. And also, I was having a chat with Ofcom a few months back, and what they said was quite interesting to me, because they said we cannot guarantee the coverage service level stream. We can say that we will have 98% type of coverage, but we cannot guarantee, even that we will not guarantee. So in that realm where you cannot guarantee anything, have you seen any change of the relationships and the conversations you're having with OEMs?
This is going back to my previous roles within telcos in the IoT space, and so I mean that sort of landscape has evolved over the last 10 years in terms of conversations. It's gone from IoT devices going into modules, for different areas within a manufacturing facility, for example, to different areas within the actual vehicle itself. Monitoring how a piece of machinery operates, for example, and tracking that towards massive private networks within a manufacturing facility, and also within ports. And how can you track a vehicle from the start of manufacturing to where they get delivered at a port, for example. So those private network conversations have been happening within the last sort of 3 to 4 to 5 years, for example. And to your last example, in terms of reliably having connected vehicles on the road, this is where typically OEMs have relationships with, say in the UK, all 3 major operators, to guarantee, well, not really guarantee, but to sort of reliably have coverage in wherever they are within the country, within the UK. And that would be the same in 150 other markets that a Toyota or a Mercedes-Benz or a BMW might have. So for them, the relationship between OEM and a telco company they have massive teams to sort of manage those relationships, and it's a bit strained, and it's a bit of a pain for them from speaking with them. And so what we're trying to do is, particularly with exposing the network functionality directly to these enterprises, is to reduce that friction, and to be able to have a standardized way to be able to talk and to be able to consume that functionality, whether you're in the US or in the UK, whether you're on T-Mobile or on AT&T, whatever network you are, you develop it once for your vehicle or for a certain type of application, and it would work in whichever market or whichever network. So that's the purpose of the Open Gateway initiative, is to have a standardized way to be able to consume network capability through different APIs. So those are the sort of conversations we've been having over the last 18 months, and a lot of the OEMs, the traditional OEMs, are clued into it, particularly the ones who look after the connectivity, and that part of the vehicle. But there's a bit of a chicken egg situation, because there's not enough capability that's exposed from operators yet, and so OEMs don't really want to invest too much into that. And then conversely, the operators don't see enough demand from the OEMs and tier ones or customers in general, and so they don't want to invest more money into their network to be able to expose that functionality. So this is the challenge that we're facing, and this is where our team sort of comes in to sort of we want to build up, drum up more demand, and sort of have more demand indicators to say, there's a lot of OEMs in this space, in the automotive industry, who want this type of functionality on the network. Can you please build it for us? And so what we've been trying to do, and what we're trying to strive to do within the next 12 months, is get a lot of statements of requirements out to the market in general, to say, with OEMs or with autonomous vehicle players directly, to say, release statements and say, well, we want XYZ functionality within these markets, within this certain time frame. Can you build this functionality for us? For these operators, these telcos. So that's what we hope to sort of bridge that gap between the supply and demand.
And as an OEM, we have to adapt very quickly. In my role, I've seen a change in terms of, you spoke earlier about markets. So on the car, we have various sensors. That's your hardware stack. But then different markets like America and China, you now have a different software supplier. So then validating the software on the hardware now becomes an iterative move. How fast can we get this out? Because your product's not changing. So from a commercial point of view, and I think the industry is going this way, you're going to see a lot more partnerships between software vehicle services companies and OEMs. And I think that's going to be that speaks to Jonathan's point earlier about software becoming a bigger issue in the automotive world.
Yeah, and I think to your point before, Jonathan, around monetization, where you can get some low-hanging fruit there, I think, big fleets, I think that's where you need to really target in terms of, for fleet operators, it's a bit of a pain for them to, to keep ahead of servicing vehicles and, keeping maintenance of vehicles as well. And so, having different sensors within the vehicles, as software-defined vehicles becomes, more and more prevalent within, these sort of big fleets. They want easier ways to be able to manage and service these vehicles. And so I think that's one way where you can actually look to see where you can actually monetize that.
Can I just answer Siddhartha's question from a slightly different point of view? I'm Mike Shaw, I'm a former chief scientist in the government, but I've done 30 years in mobile communications, mainly in the UK, but also around the world. The evolution point is an evolution of services, not just of technology. So actually, when I was first in the mobile industry back in the 1980s, there were issues to do with how would we support the car industry. And sometimes that was done indirectly through third parties. So things like anti-theft devices that could be using mobile were fitted by third-party players as an afterfit. Similarly, some of the car entertainment systems that were connected to the internet were often an afterfit. But the world we're in today is often one where we think about a prefit for a variety of reasons. And I'd just like to talk about some of those other services briefly. I think we see safety change, where mobile and PNT, position, navigation and timing, can play a much bigger role today, even before we get to the world of autonomy and level 2. So the evolution of position, navigation and timing, and some of that capability has changed a lot in the last 30 years. That starts to help the telematics story, whether it's in a lorry or a container or maybe a car. But the telematics story has often been an afterfit story that's becoming more integrated. We have sat nav in the car now, but traditionally it wasn't always fitted in the car at the beginning. Things like insurance, pay-as-you-go insurance, that didn't exist till about 10 years ago. But pay-as-you-go insurance exists today. So maybe paying per mile or ring fencing, the area you're allowed to drive in, that whole insurance market has changed. Still mainly afterfit, but it's still relevant to this discussion. Energy, your ability to find a charging station or electric vehicles, information about the mapping of that is becoming more integrated gradually. The whole story around entertainment, I've mentioned briefly, but also information services, whether it's weather or maybe road conditions. The story around breakdown, eCall. eCall was often an afterfit until it was standardized on a European basis, but the breakdown service called eCall is very important. It needs to be maintained as we go beyond 2G to higher generations. Maintenance alerts, which can actually come to your mobile phone, as with other things in the world of maintenance. Actually, you need to know when maintenance is needed, not just on the dashboard, but maybe being alerted in advance of your drive. And the idea of a car app store was unheard of 10 years ago, but people are talking about app stores as if they could deliver many apps to a car or to a driver today. So there's been a lot of evolution of services and also an evolution of afterfit to prefit. And I think that's quite important to take into account. The big issue remains coverage. The coverage a driver wants might be quite different to another driver or another passenger. But actually, if we take lessons from the fleet industry, as briefly referred to, or the lorry and freight industry, we can actually see a lot of functionality that they're already taking on board to compensate for a lack of coverage or compensate for some of the gaps that may exist. The satellite options are emerging. SatComs, your ability to have SatComs to the car, not just for navigation, but for communications, will help to build the coverage gaps. Wi-Fi in the car might help with also some solutions for coverage. So we need to look at this in a rounded connected services world rather than a cellular-only world. But also the services can get richer and richer. But coverage has to be addressed as a key issue, because you cannot, if you need cellular reliability, rely on autonomy if you do not have the coverage. I think the story about the factory is quite a different story to the services evolution. And you can say more about that if you like. But generally that services mix needs to be up.
And could that create...
So just sorry, go on. Go on, Sukhi.
Oh, I was just going to say, with the coverage, do you think that will create a two-tier system then? Particularly like, let's say the north-south divide, because you would rely on...
I don't think it'll get a two-tier system, but more coverage options are emerging. And I think actually working between the car industry and the mobile phone industry is the right partnership approach. There may be intermediary specialists who would help, but I think the coverage story is going to increase, not decrease. We're going to see more coverage gains with that combination of Wi-Fi, cellular and satellite going forward. So working in a world where Wi-Fi, cellular and satellite works together is a logical thing to do, at least in Europe. Some of the gaps in coverage in the big countries of Australia and USA I know less about, but I suspect those combinations are likely to fit in those countries as well. But, wireless is a limited, or spectrum is a limited resource. The investment to cover absolutely everywhere with cellular only is too high, So therefore, thinking about the vehicle itself, we need to think about different modes of coverage to maximize the coverage as well as the capacity. The API story comes into it because it can actually help with cross-network activity, so you're not reliant on a single cellular network. So cross APIs are very helpful to add to coverage in a cellular-only world, and I would hope that the satellite boys take on APIs as well.
Just to build on the same thing that wife was saying. So when I'm in Space to Zero, I work in GSMA Foundry as the innovation wing. Welcome all here today. One of the projects that we've just completed, just to talk about satellite, one of the areas that we cover is non-terrestrial networks. So terrestrial network and non-terrestrial network convergence into two. Helping we work over handling between the two. One of the particular projects that's just been launched, or just been completed, that I hope that we will promote is Nextworks. Now, Nextworks is a IoT sensor that exists on a smart agricultural farm somewhere in Italy, and essentially it uses private 5G network. So as we were talking about the terrestrial network, but where that's not available, because more connectivity about both to the satellite, it's using the open gateway APIs for quality on demand. So essentially, if we take this example one step forward, in a car, you have quality on demand. Depending on your coverage type, where the coverage is better, it will work well on the terrestrial network, and where it's not so good, it will go onto the not terrestrial network in the satellite or other connect. So then, to Mike's point, future that we see for connectivity is not just going to be relying on terrestrial networks. It's got to be a timing system. Hopefully, apps might come into the mix with drones for connectivity as well, just as different types. But it's very much so a hybrid solution. Hopefully, Open Gateway will be at the heart of that.
Can I jump in on that point? I think one of the things that we've talked a bit about these services and the different types of networks. One thing that we haven't, and it's quite pertinent, especially based on what happened today, is the whole security element as a result of opening up the surfaces for your system. I'm not sure if people paid attention. Today we had the whole Cloudflare outage for at least a few hours. So a lot of the websites were down. One that I use quite a bit, X, was down for a substantial amount. And as a result of that, we still don't know if it was a malicious or was it just system resilience. But if we end up being dependent on some of these off-board services, how do we actually go about ensuring the not just the resilience, but also preventing the malicious threat attacks that we open up as a result of making a device connected because of the services that get opened. That's one point that we are trying to grapple with right now. In the automotive space, we have this UN regulation R155 and R156, with Regulation 155 and Regulation 156, which has been introduced especially for this particular issue, because the industry as well as the regulators are seeing that most of the automotive systems today are now connected to some extent, and as a result of that, you've got these attack surfaces now, and which need to be taken care of. So Regulation 155 is actually focusing on cybersecurity aspects, and Regulation 156 is focusing on the over-the-air upgrade aspects. And while all of us seem to be on this call, both the virtual and the physical, we are all evangelists of technology and connectivity. I think there needs to be a slight focus also pushed around while connectivity is beneficial, it also opens up this issue of ensuring cybersecurity. And I know there are quite a few people in the room who could be experts on this. And I would be very keen to understand across the board in terms of the trade-off between the cybersecurity side and how much connectivity should we ensure. That's one. And second, when these services get provided by only a handful of providers, then the dependence on them is substantial. And if there is an outage, like today there was an outage of Cloudflare, which brought down 20% of the websites all over the world. So how do we deal with a situation like this?
Can I try and answer that? Because I chair UK Telecoms Labs, and that's based in Solihull, just down the road from where you are in JLR or a manufacturing group. So I'll end with an offer, but my comments are as follows. I think all the UK networks are being monitored for cybersecurity attacks today. You know, we have a regulator called Ofcom. I can't speak for every country as to how they regulate cybersecurity, but in the UK we have a strict regime. But as part of that, there is also an obligation to look at critical network infrastructure to make sure some of the most critical services are held up. So I can't talk to the Cloudflare story because it's too recent. But from a mobile network point of view, we test with the major network vendors, Ericsson, Nokia, companies like that, and all the UK operators today for software releases, software patches, cybersecurity attacks, all of that. We do that already. I think your resilience point can be partly addressed by you having a visit to UK Telecoms Labs to see that work. However, on the over-the-air update, I think there are some other issues in that area, such as eSIM, provisioning of SIM cards. Can there be a new attack vector coming through the eSIM provisioning groups? APIs, some of the security measures that GSMA have built in to open APIs are also about protecting against attacks from other sources like networks. So to me, I don't think they can give you a 100% never ever fail guarantee. But I think we can show you some of the measures that have already taken place by visit to UKTL or talking to GSMA, talking about these things one at a time. Can we ever stop a Cloudflare outage affecting all the cars that are on the road? I don't know. I mean, we don't know the cause of the Cloudflare outage. What I do know, having worked for a mobile operator for over 30 years, is there is a lot of resilience control already within networks that actually make the mobile networks highly resilient. Yes, there are outages from time to time, and we need to be careful about usage and having a dialogue in that area. But it comes back to the partnership point that was made earlier on. The car companies and the cylinder operators need a closer direct dialogue and not have single points of failure or single-only operator dialogues. It's better to have knowledge of the alternatives in that area.
I would take you up on your offer to visit UKTL, Mike. I'll drop you a note separately after this call.
I think we would like to do that with GSMA, if GSMA would like to be involved, to make sure that GSMA see it as well, because we can't guarantee the same process is in every country. But we do work in the UK on the European EU toolbox, which was very important to look at high-risk vendors, for example. So that is relevant to GSMA as well as to JLR from an international point of view.
Oh, thank you so much. Just because you mentioned Nokia in your talk, Mike, and I can't stop myself as to mention about this whole NVIDIA investment in Nokia, and the reason I mentioned that is partially the whole AI hype, and I personally am not very close to the role AI is playing in the connectivity / telecom side, and I was wondering if somebody in the room could talk a bit about it. I know the role it's playing on the autonomy space, but I would be very keen to understand how AI and the whole AI bubble is now impacting the connectivity side, both in terms of services, but also in terms of the foundational architecture. Because I was very curious to see NVIDIA investing in Nokia. There has to be an ulterior motive to it in terms of either the architectures or the service provisions. But I would be very keen to understand if people in the room have an opinion around that also.
Well, when that press release was issued, I lived in the hardware the Times in the US. When the press release was issued, and I was a little bit surprised because NVIDIA made several investments that week in the billions of, hundreds of millions of dollars. And I looked into it, and then I spoke to a few people. So the thing with that investment is NVIDIA's looking, well, first of all, if you look at this whole AI RAN, radio access networks, RAN networks, what I've been seeing from talking to chip vendors is everybody's trying to, Mike would probably know a little bit more than I do because I'm not really on the sort of telecom side, but on the mobile side. But what they're trying to do is push a lot of that processing into the RANs and the radio access networks. And so NVIDIA is looking to implement AI. They've already got investment from SoftBank previously to do a lot of this investment into those networks, telecoms networks in Japan. So I think what they're doing is they're just trying to make sure that NVIDIA's investment gets those GPUs in those networks, in those edge networks for the edge processing. Mike have a better perspective.
Well, I'm not sure it's a better perspective, but I would highlight that the AI RAM Alliance was announced at Mobile World Congress 2024, and that brought key players together like Nokia and NVIDIA back then. Since then, we've seen active work between Nokia and NVIDIA, particularly around T-Mobile USA, and that's why some of the announcements have been linked to T-Mobile USA, so there is a continuum that tracks back to March 2024. But I think the AI interest has been on the rise the last 3 years in mobile, at least, whether there was later announcement in March 24 or not. Certainly the AI-based exhibitors at Mobile World Congress, I think there was over 40%, 2,900 stands that had an AI capability in March this year, and I'd be surprised if it's not 60% of 2,900 plus stands in March next year. So AI is here to stay. Now, to the specific question, though, NVIDIA have invested in Nokia because they see it as a useful investment to make. So irrespective of the hype that may be around AI, NVIDIA have seen it as a wise move to do that. Then you could see how it might guarantee NVIDIA have a bigger voice in the product line of NVIDIA, as well as giving them a return. But beyond that, I think most of what I would say would be speculation, so I better not go too far. I think at the end of the day, though, it will affect the car industry because NVIDIA already supply the car industry. They already are getting deeper into the telecoms industry, and you could imagine some convergence between the two. What it's going to look like, who knows?
So, I mean, 95 is in a press release, but I'm see it's like AI, so it's more broad. But coming back to the software-defined vehicles, I was in Detroit 3 weeks ago, and I spoke to GM, Ford, Tesla, all of these companies. The interesting thing about Tesla is I'm not sure if I saw the figures, but the larger part of their revenue now comes from data and insurance, not necessarily the cars. And And somebody was telling me that was always their intention, make it bigger than just the cars. So I think software-defined vehicles, this nirvana that all these legacy manufacturers as well as the new auto manufacturers like BYD and the ones in Korea and Vietnam, I think what they're looking to do is figure out how to provide that hardware platform. And look, the platform will be the same for everybody. So then the hardware, chips and everything else, they have to be made secure. The attack surfaces, they're using zonal architectures in the hardware so that they can control the attack surfaces, for example, for security. And then they put the software layers. The people I spoke to said nobody really has got to how they can actually make money from software-defined vehicles and figured out how to implement it. And I think Jonathan or somebody said it's not in their workflow yet, and that's the big issue. It's not in that work. The software isn't in the workflow of those auto manufacturers. But many people I speak to say that, well, yes, that's what we're trying to get to, but it's a long haul. 2029 is, I think, when I saw that one of the first sort of really fully software-defined vehicles will come out, because it's a 5-year design cycle for all these cars. And the Qualcomm I was with in San Diego, so they're showing all this. You're talking about providing services and outages. They're showing how they're connecting up to all these payment services and everything in the car. And they showed me on the dash, this massive, high graphics intensity display. They can change skins, they can change whatever it is. They can buy things from the local petrol gas station, they call it, and how they make the payment and the gateways. So again, Cloudflare outages happen. I think it's nothing to do with the telecoms operators. It's actually just to do with the bits of the ecosystem that are affected. And cybersecurity is a big issue. So I think everybody is trying to figure out, if we enable these particulars of the updates, how are we going to make sure that's secure? So there's the handshakes there, and then actually making sure that the software is credible and gets the right key with interchanges. So I think there's still a lot to be done, and I don't think anybody really understands the full story, apart from maybe people on the panel and Siddharth maybe.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you brought up in terms of, I was in Munich about a month or two ago for IO Mobility, one of the major, So having spoken to a lot of the major OEMs there, and BMW, like they had a whole song and dance around the new platform, the new vehicle, the iX3. So that's a new software-defined vehicle platform they've launched. A lot of the OEMs are in the same boat. It's in the next sort of 3 to 4 to 5 years, the next generation platforms of vehicles they're going to be rolling out. They need to figure out, how they're going to actually monetize it. And those are the same conversations I had, whether I went to VW or BMW or Mercedes-Benz. Everyone had the same story. But it's interesting to see BMW and see how they go with their platform.
And iX3, I wrote about that. It's a partnership between Qualcomm and BMW, and what they were saying is that platform is something they're going to sell to other manufacturers, and the monetization is going to be on the data platforms. So Qualcomm has been collecting lots of data, and they were showing me how they're trying to do this autonomous vehicle data, gathering data for autonomous vehicles in India. They're showing me some examples of how they're doing that. The big thing, again, if you go like Tesla, the big thing for them is the data. It's not the hardware, I believe.
And it's like when you look at the market in China, for example, and the amount of EV manufacturers there and the price that they go for as well, you start to think, how are they monetizing, their operations as well. And I suppose, that's probably all the data they're collecting from, all the vehicles and what sort of, that sort of makes sense in that regard. But the ecosystem in China, I was speaking before, it's just a perfect storm for innovation over there, because you've got the operators, you've got massive teams, massive IoT teams who are dedicated for the automotives, working very closely in collaboration with the OEMs in China there. and how they're collaborating to build the SDVs together. So it's quite interesting and sort of seeing how they've taken the lead in the EV space, and so it's unsurprising why, but also regulation is another story as well. In that regard, that sort of breeds innovation as well. And so having conversations again in Munich a couple of months ago, those are sort of things are holding the OEMs back, is regulation in terms of, when you get to autonomous vehicles, for example, trying to get to L3 and beyond that. They're really, the traditional OEMs at the moment are really trying to focus on L2 plus and getting the capabilities L2 plus as best as it can be, because they're constrained in it through regulation. So it's quite interesting to see where we're going to, where's the industry going to be in sort of 2 or 3 years.
So on the regulation, so same conversations I've been having, the US manufacturers and European manufacturers say we can't move as fast as the Chinese because there's less restriction for deploying some of these services. And anecdotally, I've spoken to some Chinese manufacturers, and they've actually got certain services already that they're providing on the vehicles as over-the-air features that people buy. And what I noticed in that is the demographic of those people who are buying those are the people who don't own the cars. It's that car as a service, and they're buying the services, which is again anecdotally, so I don't know how widespread it is, and they're able to then buy certain things for the car while they're happy, and then it goes off. So it's quite an interesting play. And the other thing is design cycles there, because of the lack of regulation, are 2 to 3 years as opposed to 5 years for Western manufacturers.
Can I say there are some regulations which are beyond the autonomy levels, which should be taken into account as well? So things like the data privacy regulations, GDPR, and thinking about where can you collect data when it becomes an international product. So if, for example, you've got a car that can go across borders, can you collect data for the whole of Europe? And if so, where do you store it? And what are the sovereignty issues in the area? That's a critical factor that requires thinking around data protection regulation as opposed to traditional collection of data within a given country. Some of the satellite guys are having to think about that as well, because they are gathering a lot more data than they've ever done before. And they're not over a single country, they're over many countries at once. So there may be some interesting crossover between data privacy for the car industry that would apply in the satellite industry and vice versa.
Sorry, go on.
So I just wanted to jump on this previous point, but I think data privacy is a very important point which we should come back to. But this point that Nitin was mentioning about the development cycles, I think it's a very important one, and I think less appreciated one. And one topic that is coupled with that is the kind of clash of cultures between the traditional OEMs and these SDV providers. And most conferences I've been to these days, when it comes to autonomy or SDV, there's this buzzword called China speed. And I think every conference we talk about and we hear China speed, and it's been and it's gone from people being scared of China, and I think we can't finish this conversation without talking about China. It's gone from people being scared of China to people trying to take inspiration from China. And I was at a Financial Times event where John Elkann, the chairman of Stellantis, and he mentioned that we need to start taking inspiration from China. And if you look at the culture within China and the culture of the rest of the ecosystem, you are now seeing a lot of these traditional manufacturers building relationships with Chinese suppliers. No matter what they might say publicly, most organizations now have a relationship with Chinese organizations, to an extent that some people are actually putting their entire SDV program with Chinese suppliers. And when it comes to that, the point I want to raise from a development cycle and culture perspective is traditional OEMs are not
akin or tuned to be agile in the development cycle, whereas these suppliers are much more agile, and the kind of handshake of requirements is not a very collegiate handshake as a result of that. And that with itself brings a lot of the issues that get associated with in terms of quality and reliability and standards in the space. So I think I'll pause there. I also wanted to mention, I need to drop off because but one of the things I wanted to also mention was to bring Jonathan into the conversation from a SDV perspective, because this is a piece of work that we've done quite a bit of activity. I think some of Mike's aware of with the CSEP initiative at the Imperial College, and we wanted to bring in some of these cultural aspects. Maybe Jonathan, you can provide some insight from the work that we've done.
Yeah, so to unpack some of the points that were being discussed around how a software-defined vehicle has been implemented and monetized, and there seems to be a bit of a jostling, particularly in Europe and the US, between some of the operating systems providers. Qualcomm was mentioned, ARM, IBM, all have fairly advanced SDV products. But some of the feedback we found is that they're struggling to find customers to exploit those, and it looks like from some of the work that I've done, there's a jostling between the operating system providers, the traditional OEMs, and the current tier twos, and all three are worried that the other two are going to capitalize on the value, and actually all three of them need to work together coherently to maximize the potential of the software-defined vehicle. And so there's really two examples I see where this has worked. One is China, which has been talked about, and as I understand it, in China there were some government-mandated sort of industry structures around what kind of operating system should be used, almost a mandated app store type approach, which brought the whole industry together and allowed them to exploit and integrate software-defined vehicle approach. And then Tesla, who were built from the ground up as a software-first company. And it seems to me that this sort of the restructuring of supply chains particularly in Europe is struggling to organize itself in a way that the monetization post-sales can be really realized in the same way as some of the examples and some of the examples that have been given. And it seems to me that there needs to be some real innovation in the way in which those partners are promoted to work together, so that IP sort of comes together collectively and can be exploited through a software-first approach, as opposed to competing with one another to try and capture all the value at the top of the value chain. So this work is being done with Imperial, as Siddhartha says, and will be available as a kind of, through a report, as a kind of a tool in a way for evaluating the market and being able to understand where some of the pinch points are and the risks are and where the investments are required.
Jonathan, does Imperial need any operator view on that?
Yes, so if I maybe illustrate the model we've presented very simply, that there's the operating system in the middle. Everything below that is what I would say a reimagination of traditional automotive engineering, and then everything above is much closer to the consumer. So one of the big components that would be new and come into this is around the operating model. Speaking more broadly through the self-driving vehicle work that we do, there's a lot of investment going into the technology, but there is not much interest in investing in the operating layer. And I think that's because the business models, traditional transport operator business models, public service buses, this kind of thing, the margins are so tight that there still isn't a clear business case for that investment to be promoted. So we're very interested in the operators, but we're seeing a resistance of engagement.
But can I just say, Jonathan, if you're interested in operator input to it, there needs to be a mechanism to know how to do that. Can you email through to Subhash a contact at Imperial that maybe GSMA could engage with? Is that feasible?
Absolutely. I just need to clarify a misunderstanding on my part. You mean network operators. I was talking about mobility operator service providers.
Yes, I do. And I can understand you need some input from mobility operators as well.
Yes.
But I think some of the network operators who've been in this space a long time, whether it's for the UK or other countries, could give valuable inputs to Imperial before they publish their report.
Yes, that would be very much welcomed. That would be very much welcomed. I will reach out. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan, because I was gonna literally reach out after before that. One of the areas that I'm covering GSMA Foundry is that we're able to propose any product to terminalities. And the whole idea is we see our goal is to convene any new interests. If you've got similar pain points across different sectors, different verticals, the whole goal of Foundry is to bring those partners together and say, there's the problem, how can we solve it? Because it can't be done by the single operator, single vendor, single partner coming together. Because, I mean this respectfully, there is a graveyard of POCs out there that are literally repeating and doing the same thing, duplicating effort. Well, the only way that we can overcome this is by greater collaboration. So it's great to hear of projects like that, Jonathan, that you guys work with me here. Let us know how we can help. So I think the last one, the key roles of bringing the GSMA and the connectivity or into the discussions. Let's work together.
Can I just give another illustration of this for a minute, if I may? The GSMA Foundry is working with the European Space Agency, looking at new models by which mobile and satellite could work together. There is a sum of money available for demonstration funding if you bid by the 30th of November for this month. And this money is geared towards demonstration activity in the early part of next year. Now, the sum of money is at 6 figures, so it's worth looking at, but you might want to actually look at it to say, how can mobile and satellite help the car industry as a proposal?
But I didn't pay what for Mike. But yeah, we do have funding available for European space, and I don't think we're helping Europe.
Can you please send the details to see so I can share it? We can make a light up and I'll pop off.
I'm sorry about our email. You talk chat right now.
Thank you, Fred.
I'm sure want to say something.
Yeah, I think we've gone way past the point where we were talking about AI and telecom or SATCOM. So I'll just introduce myself. I'm currently a master's student at the University of Manchester, and I'm pursuing my master's in advanced computer science. But prior to this, I worked in the telecom and the SATCOM sector, where I was working briefly on the O-RAN space and specifically on the RAN intelligent controller. So RAN intelligent controller is the component which is introducing AI into the O-RAN space. And I just had a couple of questions where, Dr. Mike just mentioned how can we use the SATCOM sector or the mobile sector to help vehicle or automation in the vehicular space. So the sectors that I've worked on, they mainly involve beam formation or let's say handover, traffic steering and all of that. So from that point of view, I not see how the SATCOM space or the telecom space can help this particular use case. And I just wanted to understand your viewpoint on that particular thing.
Well, I think I am suggesting that mobile and SATCOMs are increasingly converged for coverage reasons. And if you start from that principle, that how much can be applied with 5G or 5G SA or 6G? That's a generational set of issues. But I think some of the capabilities as defined by Xxtra will bring in more AI alongside Open RAN, and we'll see the intelligent controller offering capabilities that go across networks, no longer within networks. But I think we need a better roadmap, 5G, 5G SA, 6G, to fully answer your question, and I'm not sure everybody is in tune with all of that.
Yeah, the main part I was trying to understand was, the current capabilities of the network. What I understood from my time at Hughes was that it's helping everything which is internal to the mobile space or the SATCOM space, and anything that requires external communication, which will eventually help the vehicular space. I not see how that can be extended to that at this moment or even in the future. So I mean, because everything that AI is doing in the mobile space or the satcom space is helping increasing the efficiency or just cutting down the manpower in that particular space only. So yeah, how it can help externally is something that I'm confused on whether it will eventually happen in the future as well.
I think it will happen eventually, but let's be clear, the coverage, mobile and satellite can work well together now.
Yeah.
The coverage, we can see some designers designing custom equipment that will go in the roof of cars to be able to see the satellite up above.
Good.
So some of the architecture inside the network will follow that course or that journey. But I'm hesitating to go into detailed RIC or ORAN type discussions here because that's a rather detailed question for this audience.
Good.
I'm wondering, because close to the same speakers are speaking, so you get some other views from other people. So I'm going to take it to consumer level there. I wonder how many people have actually been in a vehicle on a regular basis with no driver in it, sitting as a passenger. And I'll ask you why, because there's some issues that I think Jonathan mentioned. One of them is a no operator that's really figuring out how to make it profitable. I spent quite a bit of time in Phoenix a couple of months ago. I was with Intel. I saw the new fab, the Fab 52, the big investment. Then I went to a few other things over there. And one of the operators there is Waymo, which is autonomous taxi. Basically, you order it like Uber, get in, and it drives you wherever you want to go, and then you get off. Obviously, that's significantly connected vehicle. It has to be connected.
Within the city of Phoenix or other cities that they did.
St. Phoenix in San Francisco.
Yeah, but that's the city where they're operating.
So I'll just give you a couple of examples. So I didn't have dinner any day week. I was on the Thursday night I decided to go for dinner. So I went to an Uber and went there, 15-minute journey. There was a driver who was unsafe. It was raining. It was thunderstorms in Phoenix. You don't get thunderstorms in rain. So it was unusual. Very unsafe. Felt very unsafe. Felt like calling in something sick. Then on the way back, I ordered Waymo. Same environment. Rain, thunder. It stopped at a four-way stop. There's an old person in a wheelchair going across. You could actually see it on the screen. The fine detail because it's using not cameras. It's using LiDAR. And you can see it. I felt wait that and invite. So my question is, how much would you trust autonomous vehicles? Being an autonomous vehicle, I've also been with people in San Francisco, like through the city, totally autonomous. And then the question that is, are we in enough of a connected environment that's happening in the UK, or it will be like in the US where it's in certain settings only, and it cannot actually happen in London. So not towards the technical first, or the user experience first. So if anybody
having this conversation earlier, so I was in Las Vegas a month ago, and Zoox had just launched. So Zoox is owned by Amazon, and they have a robotaxi service. Totally different to Waymo because Waymo retrofitted passenger vehicles, and you can see, there's no driver in the driver's seat, and the wheel moves on its own. I hadn't sat in one of those vehicles before, but having sat in a Zoox, so it's basically a toaster with 4 seats in it. And it can move in both directions, and it's got all the sensors on the outside. Similar, you order it like an Uber, so there's a dedicated Zoox app. In Vegas at the moment, it's only in predetermined pickup and drop-off points at the moment, but it will be point-to-points like Uber very soon. And I think they're launching in San Fran. Yeah, exactly. So I think that when they're launching in San Fran soon, it'll be point-to-point as well. But I found it a lot less unnerving in a Zoox robotaxi because it just felt like you're in like a capsule, I guess like a theme park ride with no wheel, sort of like moving on its own. A lot less unnerving and a lot more comfortable in there versus if I was in a retrofitted passenger vehicle as like a robotaxi. So yeah, that was my experience in Zoox, and I rode it a few times, and it was quite conservative, but I felt safe in there, and yeah, it was quite funky in there. But conversely, having had an Uber that same week as well, they're saying they love Zoox vehicles because they're so conservative. They can just like zip past them and overtake them and whatnot. So it's quite funny. But yeah, the robotaxi experience has been great so far for me, at least.
There's quite a bit of research evidence that shows very quickly after riding in autonomous vehicles, people's trust in the vehicles increases quite quickly. And it's almost in a way that's converse to all of the technology, in the sense that the more boring it is, the more safe you feel, and the more that you trust the technology. But one of the challenges that we see is the majority of the population are going to hear about and learn about self-driving vehicles, probably in quite a skeptical way, long before they get to ride in it. And so how do we engage with the public and communicate with them about the capabilities of the technology so that trust grows and doesn't deteriorate before this kind of tipping point of, as the two of you have outlined, when once you ride in the vehicle, you quite quickly feel quite safe?
Yeah, I think it's not really so much the capabilities of the autonomous vehicles or the robotaxis. It's more, I think, you see statistics of Waymos, for example, for however millions of kilometers have been ridden. There's been like no or low incidents compared. Yeah, exactly. So those sort of safety statistics, once they sort of come out, I think for me, I would say it will get a lot more people to trust it a little bit more, rather than the actual technical capabilities or aspects of the actual vehicles themselves. So if they feel safe within one of these vehicles, they might give it a go. From a Zoox point of view, it helps to have a fairly novel-looking vehicle as well. It's just it's just a toaster with 4 wheels on it, with nice lights and stuff inside. But yeah. I guess it goes both ways. It needs to feel safe, but also needs to be a little bit of a different experience as well.
Can I answer your question from a UK point of view? Yes. So I ran some of the first driverless car trials at Greenwich some 10, 12 years ago. And my experience then was certainly worry, because actually it was very immature technology then. However, last week I was in 2 different driverless cars, one to the driverless stand, in fact. And the driver's stand is on the Harwell campus, that is very much on a grid basis and is well matched for the grid that is that Harwell campus. And actually, the experience they've had over 2 years, no accidents, and the experience given by every passenger in it has been fantastic. Why can't we have these 24 hours a day? They would run it overnight if they could, but the volume of traffic or passengers is not high enough to run it after 6 before 8 o'clock in the morning. But they're running all day, every day, 8 till 6.
I've actually written about this for quite a few years, and in closed environments, in sort of industrial and warehouse stuff in works, they have been using autonomy for a while. It mostly AMRs, autonomous mobile robots, but they sort of translate into autonomous state. And
I think in Milton Keynes, they've also had a long track record. That's on the city grid of Milton Keynes. So I think the lesson is not just about closed industrial estates, since the grid type format of the road. Some of our very narrow roads in the UK would not suit some of the Waymos, Zoox or whatever, because they're too bending, too bumpy, not well maintained. There are quite a few issues in there.
Got into the section of the French consulate in the Southampton System Act, as I see it, as it was through winding schemes, so it was built some driving vehicle that it managed to go. So,
what I think I must iterate. I mean, listening to the great use case of connected, in the ultimate is of course driverless cars that will happen and already there, right? But I'm trying to relate that towards the industry where I come from, or boring industry, not like an exciting industry, like with finance and insurance, banking, right? But I'm trying to correlate what we just discussed over the last half an hour, right? It's for us also. I mean, there is huge depend what for different industries. So the insurance industry, and banking industry. And so I'm in the airport
I used to be the CM for SVR Life. So we've dealt with similar challenges in our finance industry, right? Because it's not about how good you are, right? How good the individual organization is increasing innovation and services towards the committed industry, right? It's about the ecosystem dependence. And I think OEMs talk a lot, right? The dependency on OEMs. But I'm just trying to see that dependency has to be decoupled or de-risked, right? Because ultimately the game changers are those guys who make it far-breaking innovation to the front runners, like maybe the BMWs or Tesla, for instance, right? Has broken barriers, and they almost have a digital computer running on the road, right? Knowing everything that is happening around you. So, and of course, not to mention the Chinese manufacturers, which were mastered bringing speed to market on the chips, software-defined cars, and the speed at which they're bringing AI and all of that stuff. So, the trend is for sure services will rule the rest. I think most organizations we have seen in IT, they have gained revenue with services and not hardware, right? The hardware is only bringing speed to compute, right? And you talked about NVIDIA investing in Nokia and all of that. The AI companies are bringing in the power of AI in the hardware, so that the cost of software is minimized, right? So the cost of the ultimate service that you deliver to the end customer is the least. So that's the model that we get created. So having said that, each player in the whole ecosystem has to play its role, right? So a vendor or a manufacturer of a car, let's say, will make sure that they do downward integrations most effectively. To bring in the computer and downward integration with the machine and the computers, how it will redirect to the engine and all of that. So that's a proprietary technique or a USP, I would say, each manufacturer will bring, right? Which is true to any computer company who brings in like an Oracle or an IBM will bring in that efficiency within their manufacturing base. But anything about the computer and the ecosystem is more open source. It's more open source, just governed by the regulations and the norms that one has to be abiding to. Like in computers, I would think so. We have an app which runs on the website, on the mobile, and we run on the same GSM mobile or maybe the Wi-Fi or maybe the various network channels that are there. And each bank or each insurance company has to make it comply, right, to the industry regulation and ensure that they don't have breaches, they don't have cybersecurity acts, and so on and so forth to make sure that the thing is secure. Now, maybe there is a nuance of satellites and GSMs, but I would like to know more about why is there a huge dependency on the OEMs. I assume the OEMs you represented the network service providers and the hardware vendors, right? You have to make sure that your services are secured, as compatible with the ecosystem that you have. Of course, the regulator will say that you have to make sure that you abide with these rules. It's the same as to any IT company, right? Or any insurance company. Like cybersecurity you mentioned, right? We have to we as in the BMW or the Jaguar will take enough care to make sure that the software that they have created is secure and safe for an end customer to use, right? And they will follow the same cybersecurity frameworks and rules which any other organization would follow. I'm pretty sure there are nuances of the automobile technology which is specific to automobiles. But if you look at the framework, I see it doable. There's a huge market for that. Today, connected cars are, I think, pretty much there everywhere, and everyone who wants to buy a car would want to see a great digital services in the car, and a lot of those days they just want the car to run right. I mean, that's how it does. But show. That's why you see our Chinese cars are almost being the favorites of everybody. That UID or NG in India. NG is like created such a market share, and everybody else is now following that they are the fast breakers and they have made it, right? So the market will be there. And look at Apple. I mean, see the services that Apple delivers. That's a Maxcom business that they get from. So
coming to my point is, I was wondering, I think the market is there. The ecosystem compatibility has to be there. There will be no questions of that. And that is just a question of handling the challenges that any organization will have in making sure that their end-to-end services are delivered secure and efficient and cheaper, right? So I'm pretty excited to hear the conversation because it's a real-life conversation where you experience it. But we've done that in finance quite effectively because we also have had crashes of breaches happening many a times, and all of us have gone through millions of data being theft and all of that. GDPR, India also is now got GDPR there, but I think the regulator is doing their job. The network service providers are doing their job, but I think it's important for each organization to push themselves to make it more compatible to the ecosystem players and bring in value to the end customers. There is no question about that because I heard a lot of challenges that you are facing, and I'm pretty sure the likes of Jaguar can easily crack those challenges. No questions about that. I'm pretty excited. It's not a big challenge. Apart from Xxtra, you mentioned about dependency on coverage, and that is true for any IT or the challenge of IT. That's already right. You've seen the ultimately mobile apps how often, and you've not been able to do any transactions on the mobile, right? But it is the same as that. I mean, no, like you mentioned, ultimately it is a matter of use case. How many users are going to buy it, whether there is enough demand for it, and demand will come in from the trust people have. And more people have trust in the system. And there I feel in a way it is going the same mobile way. We have platforms like mentioned. Somebody is going to make a trusted platform. People will build on that, but the trusted platform will be you work. Like API did. I mean, it's a great platform that we've had. The gateways that we've created. In the banking, we use that extensively. And yes, there have been security issues about the API gateway. We made it secure to make sure that people can't hack on to reach APIs and on so and so forth. So I think the same is true to the connected cars. Like the nuance, I'm not an expert on that. I'm pretty sure there is a lot of complicated challenges around GSM and network and compatibility there. But I think if you look at the underlying principle of the ecosystem and the various components of the system, it has to just be integrated well. So sorry, yeah. I have a question. I mean, what happens if there are bandwidth and spectrum issues? And if there's an accident which happens due to a bandwidth issue, so who is liable? No, sorry. I'm Rajiv. I'm working in the banking sector for long time.
Yeah, so part of what I did at Land Rover was EMC testing. That's electromagnetic compatibility testing, and so that's essentially so your ECUs don't interfere with each other. For example, let's say you're reversing your car and your ultrasonics are falsely triggering, then not only is you're losing trust as a customer, you've paid a lot of good money to have a Land Rover, but then also what happens if that fault can carry over to, let's say, emergency braking. So they go through rigorous testing. I think in the automotive industry, it's pretty much been standardized. Where it's changing now is the software side of things, where you're constantly changing. Every time the software changes, you have to validate that EMC on. And then to the point earlier about the hardware platform, you're going to see a more agnostic hardware platform. And so your question was what happens in the situation where you do get an interference. Then that comes to, I guess, regulation and your testing, because, for example, in level 3 driving, if you're in a level 3 car and it fails, it still has to be fail operative, so the driver has to take control. Currently, when you get into level 4, that's when those issues would arise.
I think the question was more who's responsible.
Who's responsible? But yeah,
it's a connectivity issue.
Yeah.
Who's responsible? It's there's nothing wrong with the car's hardware. Everything is fine.
Yeah.
You have in a congested city like London, you have a spectrum and a connectivity issue, and an accident happens. Who is liable?
It's a tough question.
Illustrate the point slightly with relationship to the Automated Vehicles Act, which is primary legislation that's just been implemented in the UK, and the detail within the secondary legislation is being developed. But there's a couple of concepts within that regulation that address your point. So one is that all vehicles, automated vehicles, need to have the capability to notify that a driver needs to take over if they cannot handle the situation. That is either a driver that's in the vehicle or notification that a remote driver needs to take over. If that intervention doesn't happen within a window of time, the vehicle has to have the capability to perform a minimum risk maneuver, which basically means safely stopping the vehicle. All of that has to happen without connectivity. The one really contradiction here, which is a major problem for the industry, is that there is no recognized route to having a safety critical remote driver connectively connected to the vehicle. And so all vehicles are going to have a safety, the ability to behave safely and to stop safely without any connectivity, because there just isn't a reliable enough connection to address the point that you're making.
Yeah, I guess I take your point, but my point still stands in the sense that the window of opportunity is very low. I mean, you don't know what and how long you have. That's the issue.
So the window of time is not defined in the regulation at the moment. It will need to be in the secondary regulation, and it is a big challenge.
Okay, so can I answer your summary, because I agree with your summary, but I think there are three things you didn't say. So I think all of us in the room are excited by the prospects of more connected vehicles, and that's partly why we're here. We're trying to learn from each other. But the risk and the ownership of risk is a key factor here. So it's quite natural that a car company wouldn't want to take on too much risk. It's quite natural that a network operator would not want to take on too much risk. So the relative risks in terms of burden sharing needs to be better defined than it is today. Secondly, there are two sectors here, the car industry and the telecoms industry, that hitherto have worked together, but they're not one. They're not a single sector. So learning from each other is a helpful cross-sector activity, even if it takes a bit of time. And thirdly, we are regulated differently. So telecoms operator is regulated by a national regulator under certain rules to do with spectrum and all sorts of conditions of quality and so on. A car company is not regulated the same way. But if I take your sector, it was the insurance sector. Clearly there's one regulator that looks at the insurance sector. But this is a cross-sector challenge where there are different regulations that are not symmetric or not singly owned.
Yeah, let's see. I'm just wondering, let's see, if I'm just trying to correlate now, if a car manufacturer wants to go into the, and it wants to deliver services with it, right? The car regulator, I think most are doing that already. I know that as a car regulator, we make sure that the service is delivered by the car company. That is approved of some minimum quality levels. Is it, or is that not regulated by the staff regulators?
I think it's a negotiation based on standards rather than regulation.
Because the network service providers is a common ecosystem, which I think is using all kinds of digital transaction, right? Yeah. Be it medicals and the IoT ways or consumer ways, and the use cases can be many use cases. You're riding all on the mobile network, right?
Not all of the mobile network. I think there are Wi-Fi operators, cellular operators, and satellite.
Yeah,
and they are beginning to work together better today with today's devices.
Right. So if let's say a car manufacturer is converted their cars digitally, and it's with APIs and services and integrations and all of that stuff that's all done.
But if they're delivering certain services to the user who is buying the car and using it, isn't that regulated by the car regulator? I think if it's not, then I think there is need to be a lot of work there done by the authority. Correct? In what you say, the regulations. Yeah, it's not. And like, see, all the time, if you're delivering any services, right? Banking services across, transaction, dealing service, anything and everything. Yes, there can be a network outage. And the app will not work, and the transaction will not go through. But then regardless of whether these connected vehicles or not connected vehicles, they've been studied. Because yeah, if you start a connected vehicle, do you still get some people, the provider saying, no, you can't be performing this with Inausha? The same people are negotiated with banks as an operator, and it's usually a negotiation as to who they're for. But banks are regulated, or the insurance companies are regulated quite differently from telecoms. Yes. So I think it's a negotiation between the car and the telecoms industry as to burden sharing, who takes what burden. And that's the biggest challenge always. I mean, now like we've seen the cloud, and we've seen almost everything running on the cloud, and like the cloud service provider fails, the owner comes from the bank or the insurance company or the person who delivers the end services. I think the reason that Jonathan's point about the Imperial College study, Imperial Government, if they're doing a business case study, it's very logical to say who does what and make sure that has the best information in it to help with this thought. So this version. And doing level work. Correct. This in that effect. Well, also one of the other things is, and I've seen that in our service deliveries, when a service runs, it runs great. That's me. We do a positive test, right? It's a wow, right? But I don't think we know in what scenarios will it fail, right? Over time, it has to learn on glitches that could happen, or the machine doesn't behave in a way for a different scenario. Our inability to anticipate those test cases is something which I think is a peculiar problem for all of us. And right, that's what he said. And testing is what they I think like for instance, what we use is we use synthetic data to generate as many number of test cases we can, and then hopefully that can cover all the issues. I mean, that is a big problem. Yeah. In banking, even if it fails, even the service fails, there's no loss of life. Yeah. But out here, if this fails, there is a loss of life. Yeah. No, that concept of co-pilot for sure. Like, see, I mean, I'm an AI enthusiast. It can't be straight through. There has to be a co-pilot. I'm telling you about the eventuality. Even if the payment fails, I can still live with it. But you cannot live with that if somebody loses life. That is something which just like when I'm I just wants to finish. But this is where the hardware and the software, they're trying to build in redundancy. And if you look at any of ARM's material, they always talk about building that redundancy. Resilience is always. So you have DORA. That's why the DORA was done. My what? Can I just make a closing point, because I know you want to close. Does anybody see why Xiaomi produce mobile phones and cars? Why is the manufacturer making both mobile phones and cars? Good one. Medical. Well, why do it, There's some monitoring, like, thing is soft. So, Nathan, you said when will you feel safe? You did the consumer side of things. I think in autonomous cars will be, in my view, I wouldn't see it safer when all the cars in the road are autonomous, not a single human driver around. And that is the utopia. That will never happen. It's not utopia. It's coming. Did you watch Elon Musk a couple of weeks ago? Maybe not my lifetime.
May or may not.
I personally still want to drive a car, to be honest.
Because that is a discretion. Whether you want to have a not car in the ship. It's just a bit of traveling. Is up. Some zones.
Great. So I don't know too much about autonomous cars, but let me share a bit of my example. It's been about 3, probably 4 months now. I happen to own a Discovery Sport, JLR, for you know. It's super advanced features, everything is great, and lots of so-called, I won't even say the connected vehicle, it's a super connected vehicle. It's got a Wi-Fi inside and all the works, all the jazz. everything is good. And it's also got some amount of AI component, if I may say, inbuilt in it. Now I'll tell you where my problems come in. It's obviously a safety feature, but the problem is when you try to sort of reverse. My car is parked on a driveway, I'm right on the high road, main road rather, so there's a lot of busy traffic. Every time I try to reverse, with the car, the other car could be 20 feet or probably 100 feet away. It just stops the car automatically.
Pro safety.
Pro safety, and that's where the problem comes in. Oh no, again you press the rest and then put it back.
You've got one more challenge. There's a big lamppost just there.
Yes. So I'm saying it's good, not that it's not bad. Of course, it's all about safety. But I guess there's an element of, if I say consumer experience, that probably is something which takes a bit of backseat. But yes, that's where my experience lies. But once again, thanks to all of you. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Sukhjeevan. Thanks, Jonathan, for joining the last moment and helping us out. And I'm not sure if Siddharth is around, but yeah, thanks to him as well. So quick pointers before I sort of sign out. Please stay back for your bites, of course. We are back again at GSMA Foundry on the 2nd of December with another episode of Tech Tuesdays UK with the topic, the promise of 6G. For the new year, we're back on the 13th of January. Of course, we're not doing anything on the first week for obvious reasons. And the topic in the month of January is AI and media tech. To know more about today's episode, as well as for the forthcoming episode, please latch on to LinkedIn, WhatsApp, and all the other digital touchpoint channels what we have. And last but not the least, a big thanks to GSMA Innovation Foundry for hosting us this evening, for the lovely drinks and for the great environment. Thanks to all. Thank you.